welcome back to Big Riff Energy. How's everybody doing? Today's episode 83. It's Tuesday, September 24th, and we are doing a rundown of the greatest Southern Sludge albums ever made. I've done some of these top 10, top 12 lists, kind of more standalone, death metal, thrash metal, doom metal. I'm going through them in the order that I sort of discovered each subgenre. And today is Southern Sludge. You guys seem to dig it when I merge the list type of thing with an actual episode. So that's what we'll be doing. I'll be getting into emails later and want to talk about Brujeria. Also, you've probably seen the tragic news of the passing of Juan Brujo. Really unfortunate. Brujeria was a big deal for me as a teenager trying to find more extreme, obscure, scary, big riff energy. So I got to talk about them and Juan Brujo. But let's get right down to it. As always, you can write me at bigriffenergy@gmail.com. Subscribe to the channel, do all that if you haven't. Number one, this is in chronological order, as always. Crowbar from 1993. I know that Kirk isn't super crazy about the term sludge metal, which seems to be kind of common with bands that invent new styles of music. Black Sabbath doesn't like to be called a metal band. I don't know if they don't like it, but they kind of shy away from it. They consider themselves to be heavy rock or heavy blues-based rock, but they always sort of shied away from the term metal. And in a similar sense, Kirk sort of shies away from the term sludge. It can be a little bit limiting. These are super specific genre tags, so I get it. But, you know, to me, Crowbar invented the genre along with I Hate God, late 80s, early 90s. Crowbar's self-titled album to me is the most bulletproof one. It came out obviously very early in their career, early in their catalog. Flawless, start to finish. Riffs upon riffs, you know, agonizingly heavy at times. They've got a little bit of that New York hardcore thing in there. To me, sludge was invented when early Melvins, Carnivore, and Trouble from Chicago, when that music made its way to these guys in New Orleans, you get a record like this. And that, to me, is when sludge really became a thing. You know, early Melvins sort of hinted at it. Black Flag, My War, Side 2 sort of hinted at it. There's moments on the Carnivore records, particularly Retaliation, where you're hearing sort of the origins of that thing. And the first two Trouble records, you're hearing where the really slow Sabbathy stuff is becoming a little bit uglier and scarier and even more agonized. But when those influences made their way to these dudes in New Orleans, that to me is when sludge really became a thing. And of course, they weren't calling it that at the time, but in retrospect, it's pretty obvious. Number two, also from 93, I Hate God, Take As Needed for Pain. This is this is taking this sludge thing and really going deep with it, man. Pain, a lot of pain. This is a very cohesive statement, you know. I heard Dope Sick first and didn't quite get it. You know, I was pretty young when I got into these guys. Then I heard Confederacy of Ruined Lives, which I think maybe because of the production being a little more accessible and the vocals being a little more accessible, it sort of clicked with me. But this one, Take As Needed for Pain, is the ultimate. All the samples from the old medical films about addiction and mental illness and suffering, and just taking those early Melvins vibes, and like I said, Black Flag, My War, Side 2, Sabbath. You know, there's some Skinnerd too in here. I know these guys are really into Delta blues and stuff like that. Brutal in all the best kind of ways. Total classic. This is their best album. They believe it. We believe it. It's undeniable. Take is needed for pain. 94. Acid Bath. When the Kite String Pops. I've talked a lot about this band and this album, but yeah, it's just kind of skitzed out. It's like schizo music. They can't figure out what type of band they are. They don't know if they're sludge, black metal, death metal, psychedelic rock, Pink Floyd. There's some borderline country folk elements in there that sort of become more prominent in the next record. But this is just a total mind fuck right here, and a classic of the genre. Again, I don't think they were even referring to it as sludge at the time. I don't, sludge is kind of a weird genre tag because there's a lot of disparate, different kind of things you can do and still qualify. So a lot of the bands coming up, like, I'm not even sure if they really qualify if you're being really stringent about the subgenre tag, but I don't care. Another Louisiana band. 3 Louisiana bands in a row. 95. 4 Louisiana bands in a row. Down Nola, absolute classic. I think this was on my perfect no skip album list, and maybe on my greatest debut album list. It's a perfect record. Every single song is really, really good. This is a little more accessible than the stuff I've mentioned thus far. Kind of more leaning towards classic Sabbath, even like Leonard Skinner vibes, maybe even hints of like Allman Brothers and stuff like that, but super duper heavy. Phil Anselmo at the peak vocal performance of his entire life. Yeah, from what I understand, it just came out. And a lot of times the best stuff just comes out, almost like it's coming from somewhere else. Speaking of Black Flag, My War B-side, the riff from Bury Me in Smoke, will sound awfully familiar to those of you who listen to My War. Yeah, it doesn't get much better than that. I like most of what Down's done, but nothing comes close to that first record. Totally magical. All right, we're going to fast forward to 2007. Wake, Voices of Omens. I talked about this a couple episodes ago and probably a couple episodes before that and before that. This is kind of more akin to Acid Bath, not directly, but just in the sense of what the fuck is going on here. Again, it's like kind of reductive to call this Southern sludge, but whatever. I don't know where else you would put it. Absolute classic. I've gotten a lot of messages and comments about this album specifically. Absolute life changer. It'll blow your mind if you haven't heard it. Check it out. Wake from Little Rock, Arkansas. Going to North Carolina now. Weed Eater, God Luck and Good Speed. This is peak Weed Eater to me. This also came out in 2007. Just massive tone, especially for a 3-piece. This is when they still had Kiko in the band, who I would say is tied for my favorite Weed Eater drummer with Ramsey, who they got now. Absolute classic. I should have put some Buzz Oven on this list. I just realized, but I can't find any of their stuff. I don't even know how much their stuff is on vinyl. But anyway, yeah, God Luck and Good Speed. What's odd is I just realized the Crowbar record has a Zeppelin cover, and this one has a Leonard Skinner cover. So something about covering classic 70s bands on Southern Sludge records is common between some of the best ones. Yeah, I remember seeing Weed Eater the first time in New York, actually. And what was it? Alabama Thunder Pussy, Weed Eater, Crowbar, COC. Classic. 2005 or 6. I think 2005. And Man, I was overwhelmed with their tone. I just remember that. It sounded like two bass guitars. It didn't really sound like a bass and a guitar. It's more like a really, really bassy bass and then a not quite as bassy bass, you know, just crushing, man. Great record. That's their best one. I like Jason the Dragon a lot too. Dead Bird, another Arkansas band, hugely influential to a lot of bands, massively overlooked. These guys were a giant influence to everybody in Arkansas, including Paul Bearer, every band I was in Arkansas. All three records are good. I couldn't really pick between one. I've spoken about their first record, The Head and the Heart, which came out on Earache. This one, second record, Twilight Ritual. I was kind of around for some of the recording of this and learned a lot. And it's cool to see a record being worked on and then to hear the final product and just be blown away. This is for fans of Crowbar and Neurosis. And yeah, again, sort of the commonality we have between a lot of these albums is just agony, humid, swampy, uncomfortable withdrawals and feverish, nightmarish, dread and agony and a lot of hope and beauty and melody too, especially on this one. I'm also going to mention their next record, number 3, The Forest in the Tree. What is it? Within the Tree? Yeah, Forest Within the Tree. This one's amazing too. I'm cheating here. I'm doing 2 for 1. This came out on 20 Buck Spin a little while back. Yeah, listen to all 3 of them, man, but this one's really great too. But they're all good. That's Dead Bird from Arkansas. Again, I don't know if this qualifies, but going back to North Carolina, U.S. Christmas, Eat the Low Dogs. There's no way to describe this with words, really. It's weird. It's scary. It's biblical. It's like Cormac McCarthy on a bad peyote trip or something. There's hints of like Neil Young at his most violent and scary, Hawkwind at their most psychedelic, Neurosis at their twangiest and most unhinged. The Pentecostal stuff that permeates that region of the country made its way in. Cormac McCarthy made its way in. Yeah, it's scary. It's very singular. There's, I just used a lot of different descriptors, but none of them really actually fully summarize what's happening here. And none of them describe the intensity at all. U.S. Christmas from North Carolina, Eat the Low Dogs. Another big time life changer, mind expander. I believe this came out in 2009 or 10. I'm just shooting from the hip here. Kylesa, Static Tensions. Saw Kylesa a few times back in the Arkansas days. And I like their early stuff and I like the later stuff, but I love this. Some of the coolest riffs I've ever heard. 2 drummers and they actually make it work and it's cool and they're not stepping on each other. Scapegoat is a really, really powerful album opener. When this came out, I was getting up at 7 a.m. to go to a pretty mentally and emotionally grueling job, and I listened to this every single day for about a year, first thing in the morning, and it'll get you pumped up for sure. Scapegoat is a highlight, but Unknown Awareness is one of my favorite heavy songs I've ever heard, and Running Red has some of the coolest, evilest, scariest, psyched out riffs that you'll ever hear. These guys are coming back next year, which is super exciting. They've sort of been, it's not sort of, they've been gone for a long time, been on hiatus forever, but they're coming back. I see they're playing some fests in Europe, and hopefully they'll tour the States because I would love to see them again. This is the first time I sort of became aware of the 20 Buck Spin label. And yeah, great record. Baisley artwork. He also did the artwork for Twilight Ritual, which I showed earlier. But yeah, I like their other stuff. Like I said, every once in a while, it seems like a band will just click and something bigger than themselves takes over, and they make something that's just like obviously the best thing they've ever done. And that's the case with this for sure. Check it out. A little bit later, we're going to Richmond, Virginia. This came out in 2016. Enter Arma, Paradise Gallows. Again, would this pass a really stringent test of subgenre when we're talking about Southern Sludge? Probably not. But like the best records on this list and like the best records in general, I don't quite know where else to put it. So here you go. Also, I filmed the worst interview of all time with Inter Arma a while back. I'm trying to edit it up. So if you're interested in seeing the worst interview that's ever been made, somewhat intentionally, let me know and I'll slap that together and throw it on the end of an episode or something. But yeah, great. Psychedelic cover art, psychedelic music. Don't really know how to explain what's going on here. You just have to listen to it. And another cheat, I think this is like kind of 11 or 12 albums. I really felt compelled to mention this. Windhand, Eternal Return. This is their most recent album, 2018. They did it with Jack Endino, who did a lot of classic grunge, Pacific Northwest stuff. I think musically it would count as Southern Sludge. It's doom. I can't deal with this like doom / stoner / sludge thing, because 99% of bands that are referred to that way are terrible and boring and contrived and unnecessary, But I mean, I guess it does sort of apply to some good bands too, because really to me, this is like a grunge album, spiritually speaking. There's more things that make it a grunge album than there are that make it a Southern Sludge album. But musically, I think it qualifies as either Southern Sludge or doom. Or stoner, the lamest, worst genre tag ever invented. What really makes this special to me is Dorothea's vocal melodies. Yes, her performance is great. The vocal production is great. It feels like you're listening to a ghost. The artwork is like very indicative of what we're experiencing here. So yeah, the sound of the vocals is like very spooky and haunting. But beyond that, the actual vocal melodies that she's written are some of the catchiest vocal melodies I've ever heard in the context of heavy music. It goes back to like Ozzy era Black Sabbath or like early just stuff that gets hopelessly lodged in your brain where you can't get it out. Love this record. It sounds great. The riffs are killer. It's very meditative and almost has a mantra like quality to it. The best like sort of Black Sabbath sleep worship type music does. It sort of puts you in a trance, but we've got vocal melodies that are top tier when it comes to memorability here. Yeah, Windhand, Eternal Return. And that's it. Those are my favorite Southern Sludge albums. Those are the ones I think are the best, too. I was going to put Church of Misery on this list, but it's Southern Sludge, so got to be below the Mason-Dixon line. But yeah, check out Church of Misery from Japan, too, because they're the other real big standout for this type of music for me. Born Under a Mad Sign, their last record was really good. And Houses of the Unholy. Those are kind of the standouts to me. I have them here behind me, but I didn't grab them because I didn't think I was going to talk about them because they don't reside below the Mason-Dixon line, but they do spiritually. It's a certain swagger to the playing. Everybody's behind the beat. I I remember a good buddy of mine, Metal Dave from Arkansas, said it's like Slayer dipped in maple syrup, you know, like drowning in sweet tea and humidity. So there it is. Let me know your favorite Southern Sludge records in the comments. And again, as always, you can write me at bigriffenergy@gmail.com. Give me ideas on what to talk about on this thing. So we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors. And then we're going to come back and I'm going to talk about Brujeria and we'll read some emails that you guys have sent in. This episode of Big Riff Energy is brought to you by Pull the Plug Patches. Guys, I could not be more psyched that Pull the Plug is the first official sponsor of Big Riff Energy. I've had several companies reach out to me trying to sponsor this podcast, and I've turned them down because I'm not buying what they're selling. I love Pull the Plug so much that I reached out to them to see if they would be a sponsor, both as a fan of underground metal merchandise and a person in a band creating metal merchandise. It doesn't get better than Pull the Plug. We've done several patches with them, Curse of Conception patches, Enlighten Eternity patches. We got more coming. Nobody makes higher quality patches, enamel pins, that sort of thing. After dominating the patch game, these guys went on to make some of the best t-shirts and long sleeves that are out there. You see I'm rocking the Slayer South of Heaven long sleeve. Also had to grab the Thin Lizzy Jailbreak long sleeve. Front prints, unique prints on both sleeves, back prints, some of the highest quality prints I've had on any piece of merch. The best part of Pull the Plug is that all their merch is officially licensed. So Pull the Plug is making their money, the bands are making their money, the fans are getting the highest quality possible merchandise. Everybody wins. I love working with the owner, Simon. He is a real underground metal fanatic. He supports metal bands. He supports the metal scene and the metal community. He's highly involved in it. So go to pulltheplugpatches.com, pick something up. If you feel so inclined, leave him a note that Big Riff Energy sent you. And thank you to Pull the Plug and Simon for sponsoring Big Riff Energy. Back to the show. All right. Thank you to Pull the Plug Patches. Yeah, man. Juan Brujo has passed away. Peach passed away a little while back, so we have to assume that that's it for Brujeria. They were a big deal to me, trying to get into like the most extreme stuff I could find. When I was in my adolescence, you know, in small town Oklahoma, I was looking for anything exciting, anything that was scary or like involved adrenaline or just anything extreme. So whether that was like horror movies, like buying Cannibal Holocaust on VHS on eBay, or like The Mutilator, stuff like that, getting into death metal and sort of scarier, more underground, more obscure music. I was just looking for anything I could find that gave me that feeling of like excitement. And around that time, Roadrunner was doing these CD reissues of different albums. So they did like the best of Malevolent Creation, which was great. Darren from CKY did the liner notes for that, and he's now in Malevolent Creation, which is kind of cool. They did like 2-for-1 CDs. So like they would do 2 King Diamond albums in one package. I got first 2 Annihilator albums. Yeah, just a lot of like reissues and greatest hits and stuff like that. They did a greatest hits of Brujeria, and Hank Williams III wrote the liner notes. And I'm pretty sure that's how I figured out that there was a Hank Williams III, you know, and Straight to Hell ended up coming out a couple years after this and became one of my favorite records. You know, that guy had a really remarkable career in his own right, but he wrote the liner notes for this best of Brujeria. And I think I just saw the cover, and I'll put it up on the screen. And I was like, what the fuck is that? It looks scary, you know. And this was a time where information was not immediately accessible the way that it is now. So even though they had done the gag, whatever, 10 years earlier, maybe even 15 years earlier, I fell for the gag, partially probably because I wanted to, but also because I just like didn't really know how to look into it. But the gag was these are like, there was a lot of different rumors and like intentional misinformation and obscuring identities and all kinds of like literally like fake news stories just to whip up the hype, right? So like the gag is they're Mexican drug runners and they sold it really well. Monty Connor, who was at Roadrunner at the time, uh, they faked this whole thing that he got kidnapped by these drug runners and they held him hostage. And the ransom was that he signed them to Roadrunner. You would be surprised at how easy it is to mislead the general public and the press. You'd be, maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. But this shit worked. This shit worked. I highly recommend watching the Chris Garza podcast episode with Juan Brujo. It's fascinating, man. It's really touching, especially now that he's gone. You know, it seemed like there was a lot of unresolved, like pain and issues with the way things worked out with that band. You know, just another like example of like bands are hard, man. Like interpersonal relationships are already hard. And when there's fucking 8 people with machetes and shit, like it's gonna be it's gonna be that much harder. But yeah, man, I'm a kid, probably 14 years old in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, like reading the liner notes to this Brujeria's greatest hits and like sitting in ninth grade Spanish class, like learning more Spanish about killing white boys and shooting people and outsmarting the border patrol so you can get drugs into the United States. And that's really how I learned Spanish. I don't know Spanish, but the Spanish that I do know is thanks to Juan Brujo. And yeah, dude, it's hard to find bands anymore that are scary. You know, there's just too much information. Everybody knows everything about everything, but they don't know shit. They think they know about stuff and they don't know the first fucking thing about it because everyone has a platform on the internet. They just get out and talk about shit that they have no idea what they're talking about, right? And these guys used that gullibility and naivete to their advantage and convinced a lot of people that they were on the FBI most wanted list and all that shit. Convinced me too, up to a certain point, you know. I started realizing like, wait a minute, that's Dino from Fear Factory, or that I'm like 99% sure that's Shane from Napalm Death. I don't think that he's a Mexican, you know, drug cartel operative. I could be wrong, but it just, man, the whole thing gave the band that much more excitement. I love the music, but it's just a great example of like creating a whole package and presenting this thing that's just like aesthetically, musically, and like a narrative that's compelling and cohesive and exciting and scary, and it's genius. You know what Juan Brujo put together was absolutely genius, man. And to me, he was the scariest vocalist I'd ever heard, and still is. Like, even though I know none of the folklore or the myth behind the band is real, even though I know that, like when I put on Matando Gueros or Brujerizmo or whatever, it's easy to get sucked into this world that they're creating where it's like, holy shit, this is like, this guy's a satanic drug lord that's like kidnapping people and chopping them up and doing rituals and sacrifices and shit. It's amazing. That's like, that's actually scary. All that fucking European black metal stuff isn't, that's kind of more like Disney fantasy. That has more in common with like organized religion, even though it's supposed to be against it. But the Brujeria thing, Brujeria, however you say it, That's some real life evil shit, you know, even though they're just telling a story. They're telling a story about real dark, scary shit. And it got me really excited as a kid, and it still does. I debated going into the vault of insane stories on some like tangentially related Brujeria stuff. But I don't know. I kind of don't want to. I don't know. I already did kind of make it all about me and not about Juan Brujo, but I don't want to do it even more. So, but I have a couple funny Brujeria sort of related stories. If you want to hear them, let me know. I'll tell them. But right now, I think I'll just leave it at that. I love those records. Check out especially the first one, Matando Gueros, killing white folks. I love it, man. Made at a time when people were a lot less sensitive, you know, and things were just more fun. All right, going to emails. Chris. Hello, my friend. My name is Chris, and I'm a lifelong metal fan. I recently found your YouTube channel. I absolutely love your views and insights on music. We eat, sleep, and breathe the same music for sure. I also found your amazing band on Spotify. I cannot believe it took me so long to hear your music. Nothing has spoken to me music-wise like your music has since the early 90s when I first heard Alice in Chains. Man, thank you. That's awesome. I was so inspired by the music that I sat down and did some artwork for one of my favorites, Sorcerer's Fate. I'm going to throw this artwork up here, man, if you don't mind. Really cool. uh, I'm a photographer for a living, but I draw, paint, and do digital art. It is my other passion other than music. Anyway, thank you for your amazing music. It's really spoken to me. I hope you enjoy the art piece. Have a great day. Yeah, Chris, it's killer, man. Thank you. I'm flattered by all of that. I really appreciate it. So if you're just listening, Chris did a really crazy sort of, I could see why I can see that you're a photographer for a living because it just sort of has like a photographic quality in a really cool way. But yeah, Chris did a piece of art for Sorcerer's Fate. It's really cool. Thank you, man. That's awesome. I love that we can inspire each other through our different mediums, you know? You mentioned Alice in Chains, man. I just watched a Jerry Cantrell interview with Rick Beato. That's really good. You should check that out. And they were playing the comeback album, Black Gives Way to Blue. And that might be the best sounding record ever made. The guitar tone, like I would be in the other room doing something and I would hear a song being played and I'm like, which album is that? And run in and it would be Black Gives Way to Blue. And it's just like, maybe the best sounding album ever made. I remember when that record came out. That was a big deal. But yeah, thank you, man. That Alice in Chains is one of the greatest bands of all time. So I'm honored to be mentioned in the same paragraph as them. Wayne, I know you aren't a big black metal guy, but do yourself a favor and check out the latest album from Spectral Wound titled Songs of Blood and Mire. Might be weird to me. It's like black metal party music. I haven't had this much fun rocking out to a black metal album in years. Yeah, I heard some of it. I wasn't like super into it, but maybe I can give it another try. For black metal, the record I mentioned last week showed up, Dreamless Veil. What's it called? Every Limb of the Flood or some shit. Dreamless Veil. It's out on Relapse right now. Dreamless Veil, every Limb of the Flood. To me, that's the best black metal I've heard this year. One of my favorite records, period, that I've heard this year. It's really, really good. I was talking to Mike from Inner Arma who sings on it. Sort of told him, man, some of it reminds me a little bit of Wake, which is about the highest compliment we can give each other. That's what everybody's striving for. But it's great, man. And there's a moment on that record that has some of the fastest double kick I've ever heard in my life. And he only does it for a little bit because it almost just sounds like it's so fast that you can barely even hear like any separation between the two kick drums. I think it might be in like the top 10 fastest kicks I've ever heard. So that's cool. That kind of made me feel like a kid again. When you're young, getting into extreme stuff, it's like that kind of thing really matters. Like, oh, that's the fastest double bass I ever heard, you know? And it sort of took me back to that. But dude, check out Dreamless Veil. if you haven't already. I might try to give Spectral Wound another spin, but I just wasn't super captivated by it. Okay, Wayne continues on to say, I wanted to ask you about singing. I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think your voice has improved a great deal since Curse of Conception. Did you take lessons or work on it in your own way over the years? Do you think anyone can learn to sing, or do you think you need some kind of natural ability? I think there's a difference between being able to hold a note and actually having a nice timbre. I don't think I can hold a note or sound good doing it, but I want to try. Where do you even begin? Thanks, man. Yeah, my voice objectively has improved a lot since Curse of Conception. Some people prefer my older vocal style. I was listening to Merciful Fate the other day, and I remember like an old Decibel review where the guy said it reminded him of the more like mid-range King Diamond vocals, not the high stuff, but like the mid-range. And I thought that was just so like inaccurate. But I was listening to the song Gypsy from Don't Break the Oath yesterday, and I was like, oh, yeah, when he's singing in his lower register, it sounds like he's crying, kind of. And I was doing that in the early Spirit Adrift days because I couldn't figure out any other way of hitting the notes because the notes were very high for me. I'm a bass vocal. Like in school choir, I was a bass 2, which is like the lowest range. But the stuff I sing, especially in Spirit Adrift, is like way out of that range. So being inexperienced at singing like that, for whatever reason, the only way I could figure out how to do it was to make it sound like that wailing kind of. It's like somewhere between like Pat Walker. I got compared to the dude from REM too, which kind of makes sense. And then yeah, I guess if you listen to those mid-range crying, wailing kind of King Diamond vocals, it was some weird mashup of that. But it wasn't. It was kind of intentional for the stylistic element, tragic sounding thing, but it was kind of just more like that's the only way I could figure out how to make it work. I haven't taken vocal lessons. I warm up a lot, especially on tour or like leading into a tour, leading into the studio. Although I've kind of backed off on that recording in more recent years, I just kind of show up and get going and you just sort of warm up naturally. So yeah, it's been all just kind of self-taught stuff. I learned a lot of very effective breathing techniques when I was like a high school choir boy. But a lot of the other stuff I had to sort of unlearn actually. Can anyone learn to sing? Yeah, I mean, that's almost sort of like a philosophical question. My philosophy is that anybody can do anything unless you have some sort of like legitimate physical or mental disability. I think anybody can do anything. Like if you can hear and speak, you can learn how to sing. Like listen to John Prine post cancer treatment, and his voice is just like fucked. It's fucked. But he somehow figured out a way to take that brutalized mechanism that's been just like ravaged by medical treatment and make it sound compelling and beautiful. So if he could do that, I mean, and he was naturally gifted too. I think obviously people have natural ability. I fucking hate those people. Like Dio, natural ability. Rob Halford, natural ability. Mel from Royal Thunder, you can almost teach somebody to sing like that, but not quite. And that's kind of how I look at myself. I'm like, the only way that I've approached a vocal ability that doesn't completely bother me is just by doing it for years consistently. And a lot of it is like mental because you're working with such a finicky, surgical type of mechanism that you can't see. Most of the mechanism involved in singing, if not all of it, you can't visually look at. When you're playing a guitar, you can visually look at it. And tension will just destroy your ability to sing well. So like all of that is controlled by your mind. All of that subconscious or unconscious tension in your body, uh, you have to figure out how to like override that. And I know, like I've read Phil Anselmo when he was doing Vulgar Display of Power used a trick that Chris Cornell used, which was red wine. I guess a lot of red wine and cigarettes. Uh, I don't drink. I can't drink. So I've had to figure out how to like forcibly relax my mechanism over the years. And a lot of that comes through confidence. And, you know, you can work like at home all you want, do warm ups, like plenty of shit on YouTube to watch about how to sing without tension, how to get your mechanism working. But then once you get the mechanism working, you have to produce sounds that sound cool. You know, you have to like sort of figure out where your voice naturally falls on certain vowel sounds or certain movements melodically. And, you know, unless you're naturally talented like Dio or somebody like that, for me, like I might have to try one word like 10 different ways. You know, if I'm recording or whatever, go over one line, and the more I sing it, the more I'm like, oh, I should, this word, my throat and my diaphragm feel like this, and my teeth are here, and my mouth is here. And you just try to figure out connecting all of these dots of all these different tricky mechanisms to produce a sound that you want, that you think sounds cool. Yeah, I'm working with I was working with my dude Kirk on guitar lessons and all recording and all kinds of different stuff. He's working on an album, and uh it's hard. Kirk, keep at the singing, dude. Don't give up. But it's a whole lot harder than like learning how to play guitar or anything like that. So I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. Yes, I think people can learn to sing. I think people, like some people are born great singers. They just have it. And I don't think I'm one of those people. But I think a lot of my favorite singers are not those people. Like Hetfield, I don't think is that type of person. Yeah, I can't think anybody else. Hetfield, man, he's not one of those guys. So it gives me hope. Ozzy, I'm looking at Ozzy right now. Yeah, I don't think Ozzy is one of those guys either. He's just doing it by any means necessary, you know? So, yeah, I mean, look at Ozzy, not a naturally gifted singer, but probably if you polled the entire earth, who's the best heavy metal singer ever, Ozzy would probably come up number one in that poll. Whether that's accurate or not, you know, iconic voice and definitely not a naturally good singer. What else was I going to mention on this? I don't know. Just give it a shot, man. Give it a shot. The way I've got to a place with it where I'm not completely dissatisfied was just by singing. I mean, that's it. Pick a song you like and fucking sing it. Record yourself too, because it's going to sound different in your own head, hearing it, you know, in the room or whatever, versus hit and play on a recording. I think there's probably like, you could probably find stuff on YouTube or somewhere where people have made like karaoke tracks of songs that you like. So they remove the vocals or whatever. And you can like dump that into GarageBand or any sort of recording thing and like sing over that, listen to yourself back. But it's hard. It fucking sucks for a long time. And you will want to give up and you will feel like a fraud and all that. Again, a lot of it is mental. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Some people I think are born naturally, the second they exist, they're good singers. Kind of the same way that in like combat sports, MMA and boxing, some people have natural punching power, like one punch knockout power, that other guys, no matter how much they train, no matter how much strength and conditioning they do, no matter how much better their technique is, they just genetically, for whatever reason, will never have that kind of power. But they can still win, right? So singing, kind of the same thing. Even if you're born without that natural gift, you can train enough and get good enough where you're almost as good as somebody with that, whatever, God-given natural genetic ability. Okay. Wayne continues to say, anyway, thank you again for all the great new music recommendations and for Big Riff Energy in general. Us Australian fans need to get together and figure out a way to get Spirit Adrift over here. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at cranking back up next year. Obviously, we've been on hiatus for about a year now. Been doing other stuff. But it looks like we're gonna start cranking it back up next year. I got a lot of stuff recorded too, but I might be one of those things where I just throw everything away. I don't know. But I think Spirit Adrift will be back on the road next year. We'd love to come to Australia. I get a lot of emails and messages from Australia and New Zealand. You guys are super passionate about music and stuff that I like. So it would be cool to come over there. I guess that's it. Check out all those albums that I talked about. Southern Sludge. Tell me some of your favorites. Man, rest in peace to Pinche Peach and Juan Brujo. Really sad, dude. Yeah, watch that Garza interview too. I'm no fan of that kind of music that he plays, or I forget what his band's called, but his podcast is great. He's a really, really great listener. He's just very present. Seems like a really sweet guy. And Juan Brujo seemed like a really sweet guy too. Which you wouldn't guess from listening to Matando Gueros, but I like that. I like the dichotomy of that. All right. See y'all next week.